Hello, can everyone hear me okay? Oh my God, so many beautiful faces. Thank you for coming. We're very excited to have you here. My name is Yoelle Gulko, and I'm a human connection filmmaker. So I tell stories about the human experience. I love just understanding people on a deeper level. And for me, the experience of our relationship with our phones was something that I felt like I couldn't escape. This constant nagging feeling like you always have to have your phone by your side. And when I was in college, I felt that everyone was talking about getting off Instagram. I need to get rid of my phone. I need to delete Instagram, but I feel like I have to be there. And I just felt that there was this generational lack of agency. Why do we feel that we need to have our phones always by our sides? This concept that we have no power over this situation, and that's just how it is. But for me, the more I looked into this, I realized that it doesn't have to end there. There's actually a movement of young people that are creating the solutions to this issue, and young people can actually have agency over this experience. And so when I discovered that there was a youth-led digital well-being movement, I made it my mission to tell that story. So I created a documentary called Our Subscription to Addiction. It would tell my personal experience hitting rock bottom down the YouTube rabbit hole, and my personal discovery of a youth-led digital well-being movement. The fact that there's people right here, that all of us are a part of creating the solutions. And so I think these individuals have some incredible wisdom for you to share. I selected them because they were part of the most formative experiences that I had in learning through this movement, and I wanted you all to learn from them as well. And really, this panel is all about that. It's understanding youth stories, how to use them to create change, but also understanding that there's more to youth than their stories. There's their expertise. There's also ethical storytelling, how to protect their stories. That's something I'm very personally passionate about. All right, let's introduce our panelists, shall we? So I'm going to start down there. So Zamaan Qureshi is the co-chair of the Design It For Us Coalition. It's a coalition of young people that are advocating for solutions to protect people online through legislation. Zamaan has testified in the Vermont and Illinois state legislature. He's been invited by President Biden to the White House to discuss advancing mental health access, and recently been honored as part of Forbes 30 Under 30 2025 list. Featured in Time, The Washington Post, MSNBC, and more, Zamaan is a powerhouse that is part of leading the charge for a safer online future. Emmy Kim is a college student, actress, and tech policy advocate based in Los Angeles. She's worked at youth advocacy organizations like the Log Off Movement and the Design It For Us Coalition. She was the lead youth consultant for the California Age-Appropriate Design Code, the first bill in the United States to regulate design around big tech, and she testified for its passing. And she's worked with political leaders from all across the world to formulate and develop tech policy. Emmy has been featured in CNN and CBS documentaries, interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Forbes, and Los Angeles Times. And Emmy recently starred in the film K-Pops, which premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in September 2024. And lastly, we have Maddie Freeman. She's the founder and CEO of No So November, a digital wellness nonprofit leading social media detoxes all across the country and recently the world. She's championing mindfulness for her generation and future generations to come. She's a winner of a grant from The Social Dilemma, Look Up. She's a Young Innovator and Behavioral Health Awardee, a McGill University Youth Fellow and Watson Institute Fellow, a Young Futures Innovator, and Maddie was also recently listed on the 2025 Forbes 30 Under 30 list at age 23 after graduating from the Lee School of Business at CU Boulder. All right, those are the bios. I hope you know everybody a little bit better. And a quick housekeeping, just to kind of set the stage. This is meant to be more of a conversation than a panel, so we're really just gonna feel free to build off of each other's points, keep it very natural flowing. And we'll leave some time for the Q&A at the end, so please come prepared with your questions. And so we are filming this session, so we'll be filming this session, the panelists here, but not the audience, so don't worry about that. And for those that wanted the CPE credit code, please pay attention because I'm not seeing it anywhere here, so I'll just tell you the code. So the code is KE150655. Say it one more time for those that need it. KE150655. Everyone go with the code? Okay, awesome. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so there's so many different problems when it comes to social media. We could just talk about it all day. This could be a whole other panel, but this is not that panel. So what problem in this work are you most passionate about? And try and be concise.
Happy to start. I don't know, there's many different areas that you could take this question on. The one that I approach this work from the most is around safety and privacy by design. It's this idea that social media has been a detriment to the mental health of young people because of the design features that social media companies employ and deploy on young people. And that's not to say that social media hasn't had tremendous benefits for our generation. I don't think anyone is arguing about that. But what we are really concerned about, and what concerns me the most, is the way in which these technologies have been used to addict, to harm, and to ultimately harness a generation as the guinea pig generation. So Design It For Us, this coalition that I co-chair and co-founded, was born out of the California Age-Appropriate Design Code, this novel framework to legislation in the United States that said that if we can hold social media companies accountable, not for the content that they host, but for the design features that they deploy, we can create a safer online space for young people. And I genuinely believe that that is a theory of change that has taken foot in the United States. We're seeing the kinds of interventions through this design focus pop up all over the country now, following California's efforts in this area, and I think really leads the way for how I think about this work.
To kind of piggyback off of, I worked on the California Age-Appropriate Design Code, and so I also heavily believe in a design-focused initiative, but to kind of not nail the but the metaphor I'm thinking of. Anywho, I also really love focusing on the ways that these algorithms work. So we have had a lot of young people come forward and say that they've looked up a diet or an exercise, maybe a new salad recipe, and within a week they're being sent tips on how to lose weight, and those tips are just telling you how to be anorexic. And so those are algorithm-based problems. We can't say you can't post X, Y, and Z because of the First Amendment, but we can say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be pushing these types of things to young people that quickly, or at all, but for now, not as quickly, right? And so that is something that I love focusing on, figuring out how are young people finding the content that is harming them in such a dramatic way, and also how to open up those conversations with families, teachers, the adults in their lives to help mitigate and to help support as these problems arise.
100%. Yeah, so from my perspective, I work within schools with young people a lot, and one of the biggest complaints I always hear is I just cannot stop scrolling. I cannot get off my phone. I'm sure we have all said that, heard that, felt that. There's this issue of addictive design that we keep talking about, that these platforms, Instagram, TikTok, are inherently designed to be addictive. They're begging for our attention and our engagement, and young people are struggling to battle against that. They're trying to set limits for themselves to decrease their screen time, but they feel like it's virtually impossible. I always like to say, they are actively in a battle against an algorithm that's 100 times smarter than them, built by engineers that are 20 times smarter than them. So it's really a battle that's very difficult to win. And what I've seen and what I focus on is that is having drastic negative impacts on youth mental health. When we're spending between 6 to 9 hours a day doing something that is not benefiting us and isn't conducive to being mindful and being present, that is stripping our ability of being able to turn towards healthy coping mechanisms and healthy habits. And it's putting all of our attention in one boat rather than spreading that across, focusing on developing deep relationships, spending mindful time with yourself to, especially in developmental stages, to get to know yourself and to sit with negative hard emotions rather than using social media as a pacifier. So that's that's kind of the one that I tend to focus on as the main problem for me.
Thank you for that overview. And yeah, for me, what bothers me most is just the business model, that they're really profiting off of our attention. That shouldn't be that way, but it is the way that it is. And, I didn't know that when I downloaded Snapchat in 6th grade. I didn't know that they were preying off my attention. I just thought it was a way to connect with my friends. So I think in the documentary, we really try and capture a youth explainer. We show a little 2 to 3 minute explainer of this business model and addictive design to try and educate young people. And as we show this film in schools, we really want to try and show young people that this is how it works, because they're just not told that when they're given their phones. And I think education is power and knowledge is power. I mean, that's why we're here, aren't we? So I think that's just part of the exciting part of being able to share this wisdom with the kids that we work with, because this is something that we had to learn, and that's why it's so important that they do as well. So you've all kind of nodded to some of the solutions that you've worked on. Please feel free to just share. What is it that you've worked on? What are you most passionate about when it comes to the solution? What is it that you've created all these years? Feel free to chime in, whoever wants to go first.
I think I'm a good place to start. We've talked about this a couple times, but the California Age Appropriate Design Code is a bill that is modeled after the UK's Age Appropriate Design Code. We had the amazing Baroness Beban Kidron, who fostered that bill there, come to California and help us develop the bill. It, in its simplest terms, would force social media companies to turn off and disable any known harmful and addictive features. So things like 24-hour scroll, endless scroll, 24-hour push notifications, targeted advertising. These simple things that seem so simple are so helpful. And we also try to use that in a way to target drug sales through social media. A lot of children are finding their way into purchasing drugs through Snapchat, DMs, and things of the sort. And so disabling features like an adult cannot message a minor unless the minor has already followed them back was a major thing that we were trying to push to try to mitigate both child trafficking and sexual harm and drug sales. So we pushed that forward. That passed, thankfully, back in 2023, late 22. And from there, the co-founder and CEO of the org that I work at, the Log Off Movement, Emma Lemke, who y'all saw in the teaser with the beautiful eyebrows testifying in front of Congress, she met Zamaan, and the two of them created Design It For Us to kind of do more legislative work in a much more legislation-focused way. We have then moved forward to work on state bills and also federal bills and testifying in front of Congress. And so we have found ways to make this a legislative solution because parents don't always have the control that some adults think parents do, right? In the same way that I always say, do you know how many times your kid raised their hand in class today? Do you know what color pencil they used in their pen case? Did they actually eat their lunch or did they throw it away? We don't know. So how can you imagine a parent to then police their social media usage? It's literally in everyone's back pocket. And so I always said, we put cabinet locks in the kitchen. We put training wheels and helmets on kids on bikes. Why don't we do the same thing with tech? Government, other adults have come forward to set standards to keep kids safe. And the one place that we have not done so, even though social media existed for years, is in our phones. So how do we help facilitate parents and teachers and kids to be safer while also allowing kids to grow in the ways that they are meant to? So we found that legislation has been the strongest starting point. We know that it's not the full solution, and we know that it is super nuanced, and sometimes these pitches can have other harms that we weren't anticipating. But we believe in the idea that we have to start somewhere, and we found that the best place to start is in legislation.
Yeah, it was a great overview. I mean, just taking a step back, I think a lot of the approach to this kind of work is about imagining what a safer digital experience looks like. I think for many of us to think about this as the products that we've grown up in, I'm kind of the older end of Gen Z. I'm 22, so I remember when Instagram's feed was chronological, when TikTok wasn't around, where a lot of our social interaction happened on Snapchat. And that has largely stayed the same, that the same few companies continue to maximize our digital experiences while growing up. And so because of that, I think it's very difficult, especially for young people, to imagine what a different digital experience looks like, because we have been socialized in large part by these companies that whatever features that they offer to us and whatever products they offer to us is the end-all be-all. That is where our social interaction happens. And I think part of this work and part of the young people involved in this work is about taking a step back and saying, okay, the status quo isn't working right now. And there are changes that we can make that actually improve upon and allow us to maximize the good and mitigate against the bad. And so a lot of the work that has really driven our lived experience into this space is around how we can maximize the voices of young people, especially in the policy arena. Because these social media companies have largely abdicated their responsibility in trying to take steps to safeguard us, what ends up happening is, civil society and the nonprofits that many of us work with, and are associated with have taken steps over years to try and force social media companies to make changes to their algorithms and to their products to be safer for young people. And in essence, what happens is we get the same empty kinds of proposals or the same kinds of commitments that don't end up facilitating the kinds of changes that we want to see. And so I believe that's where legislation and policy is so necessary. Our government doesn't always work for us, but I do believe that if we can create experiences where young people feel like they have the ability to have agency in telling their story and sharing their lived experience, it informs thoughtful policymaking. And so that is where the ideas around Design It For Us started and where the movement has grown. It started off as a very small group of young people. It has now evolved into a coalition that is 250 members from around the country and around the world. We're in 35 states and 17 different countries. And I think it speaks to the power of young people who want to take back agency over their digital experience. Right now, we're so passive in the way in which we interact with social media and the way in which we interact with our phones. And so this is about taking back some of that agency.
Love it. I'm so inspired by you guys because this legislative work is so key to actually fostering the change that we want to see. I'm definitely not as well versed in that realm, but I'm so grateful for you guys doing that work. It's beautiful. So I would say my position kind of in this movement at large is trying to do harm reduction at the baseline level with young people. This is an ever-evolving issue, and it kind of, depending on the age group, things will change a lot depending on what platforms are used for young people today and the ways that they interact with them. So I've crafted this solution. I started my nonprofit, NoSo, in 2020 during the pandemic, and it was a response to a mental health crisis that I saw in my community, and I saw social media playing a large role in that. And the way I approach this issue is through the idea of digital detoxing. There's evidence shown that a 1-month detox or longer can drastically improve youth mental health and well-being. So that's kind of the foundation of what I do. So I work in schools. I've created kind of a digital literacy program to teach young people about the addictive design of social media and how it can impact mental health. And we try to equip them with the tools and resources that they need to be able to form a healthier relationship with technology. Taking a detox is a really powerful step, taking a month-long break from tech, but it doesn't have to be, tech is bad, like delete it forever. It's just how can we utilize breaks to form that longer-term healthy relationship. And so the other movement that I've started is called the No Social Media November Challenge. So every November, people around the world partner up with their friends, their teams, their families to take a month-long break from social media and really focus in on what kinds of healthy habits they can engage in and how they can deepen their relationships in a more authentic way without using platforms begging for their engagement. And then the last kind of arm of what I like to do is hosting mindfulness-based events. I've really seen how, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but being constantly distracted and always having something that can kind of like take you out of the moment makes mindfulness non-essential. There's no reason that we need to be present or in the moment or feeling hard emotions if we can always pacify that with something that's really stimulating. Like when you find yourself in an hour-long scrolling session, you almost don't even feel like you're a human being anymore. You're so engulfed in the screen. And that takes our ability of being here right now away from us. So I like to host mindfulness events with participants, specifically mostly young people, where we practice things like meditation or journaling or group discussion, or we're trying to do like cold plunges and stuff like that. Just trying to kind of throw people out of their comfort zone and try things they've never tried before in a supportive community to foster that in-person engagement. And it really is something I kind of like to say that fosters mindfulness when we're always used to mindless consumption. It's kind of the antidote to that. And we try to infuse this in our school program as well. We encourage students doing the detox to try these activities, try new things, and practice that ability to be with yourself even if you're not feeling good. So that's kind of the lens that I look through, and we've seen some really incredible results. I mean, just it's crazy because it's such a simple concept, but taking a break, even if it's just a week, can do wonders for your mental health. I've personally, a lot of my friends are here, they've done the detox, and when you take that month off, it feels so good, and I'm just excited to continue spreading that to different schools around the country and now into Canada as well. So that's kind of the lens I do this work through.
That's amazing. I'm like, this is insane. Some of the things that you're hearing now is what I kind of experienced when I first cold DM'd them on LinkedIn. And I was like, hey, like, wow, you're so cool. Like, here you're working on this movement. Tell me about it. And I remember when I discovered it, I was like, what? Like, you could do all that as a young person? Like, that's crazy. And it's funny because I started in this just kind of looking from afar. I was like, wow, they're so cool. Like, I watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix. I don't know if anyone's ever watched that before. And that was so inspiring to me, and it taught me so much about the problem, but I was like, oh, well, like maybe one day I could work for The Social Dilemma. That would be cool, or like intern for them. But discovering that there was something I could do right now in that moment was insane. And at the time for me, there was actually a grant that came out from The Social Dilemma. They said, hey, if you're a young filmmaker who wants to create a story about this, apply. We can give you mentorship and a grant fund. And I was like, what? This is like made for me. That's crazy. And so my idea for the film came at the same time as this grant. At first, it was just kind of an excuse to apply because I was like, oh, I want to be mentored by them. But soon it grew to my discovery of, I felt this purpose that I needed to tell that story. I needed to showcase these incredible individuals to the rest of my generation, because why does nobody know about this? Like, this is insane. And I think the amazing thing about everybody here is everyone comes from a different place. Everyone comes from where they're most passionate about. In my case, that's storytelling. I love telling stories. And getting the different approaches to the solution, from legislation to schools, from that grassroots element as well. I think this movement of young people is so, we also have some folks over there that are in this movement as well. I think the amazing part is it's so diverse and it features so many voices, and it really comes from everyone translating what they're passionate about into what they feel is a part of the solution. And I think that's a very important element of that as well. So I'm actually going to shift gears a little bit, because I think we mentioned a little bit of youth stories, right? And some of us here have shared our own stories. I think that's, whenever we think of young people, I think we turn to them for their stories often on this issue, and I think that's incredibly important. But I think it's also important that we know how to handle those stories, and I think that's something I really want to focus on with this panel. And so I think Emmy and Maddie have really done a lot in this movement to share their stories from a place of power. But I think that also comes with great responsibility from those who are asking for those stories. And so I kind of wanted to give a chance for each of them to share a bit about their experience and maybe share anything that they want people to know about it.
Yeah, so like kind of everyone here has been saying, this movement was very small when I first kind of joined. My experience getting into it was because there was a YouTube channel called Jubilee Media that does the like everybody's blindfolded. Which one isn't Asian? Or the like, here's like a bunch of people that are Christian, a bunch of people who are atheists, talk to each other. And I did one of those videos as pro and anti-social media teenagers. I was 15, about to turn 16 when I did that video. And I sat in fully in the perspective of like, I just don't like it. It makes me feel bad. And next to me was Emma Lemke, the beautiful eyebrows. And she had started the movement as a like high school project. And then she was talking about this thing, and I'm sitting next to her, and I'm like, you're a year older than me, and you're really smart and really mature, and I'm just here to complain, and you have solutions, and I'm scared I shouldn't be here. And she saw that in me and then said, no, you're gonna be part of the solution. And so she brought me into her group. And so I got into this movement because I had shared my story, fully not being aware of the actual repercussions of I'm crying on a video with 3 million views. Like, that is on the internet forever. And I like didn't think of that at the time. I'm 15 crying, and then it's like on YouTube, and then I get 1,000 followers on Instagram, and I'm like, this was not my whole thing was me saying, I don't like social media. Why are you following me? And about a year or two later, the inquiry came in about age-appropriate design code, and they wanted me to testify. And of course, you get the young kid who got really popular from talking about why it hurt her to talk about how it hurt her at the legislature. And so now I'm sitting in the California legislature in front of a bunch of adults that have power that I don't know, and I'm crying again. And so it's this perpetual cycle of, you cried for me once, here's a documentary camera, cry again. Which is terrifying. I was 17 when the bill passed, and the whole time I was asked repeatedly, come do this interview with me. Let's talk about it. Here's the very thing you said that made you cry. Go. It makes you feel awful. And there's also nobody there to tell you, because these adults that want this bill to be passed, these adults that have had their children be harmed, they want somebody to talk about it. And who can talk about it better than the kid that did it before? I'm trustworthy in that space because I've done it and I do it well. And so something that I have recently been really focused on is protecting young people getting into advocacy, because they don't know. In the same way that we warn our kids to not post something stupid on Instagram because it'll be there forever or someone will see it, no one told me that someone would see this. And suddenly I'm on an Anderson Cooper CNN documentary. Like, who tells you that, right? And I am somebody that, like, now that I look back on it, like, okay, I did it, cool. Do I wish I did it a little bit better? Do I wish I did it a little bit differently? Yeah. But I also wouldn't go back and not do it at all, right? I want young people to feel welcomed and secure to come into this space and share what they want to share and how they want to share it. But the adults in their lives need to make sure that, yeah, for your college application, for your resume, this documentary looks good. And a lot of young kids, especially in high school, is when they're starting to come join our movements. They're thinking about their applications. The documentary looks cool, but it also follows you, right? I'm now an actor. I do work in front of a camera for entertainment purposes. And I was just at TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival, and I had people asking me about this work because when you Google me, that's what comes up first. So I'm trying to talk about this movie that I did. I'm sitting next to all these incredible people, and they're like, do you remember when you cried? Like, talk about that. How is that different from this? You work in bad social media, like, boo, social media, and now you're an actor. What's happening? And I'm like, that's not the message we're sharing, right? But people have that narrative, especially when you sit and you talk about how negative it was and how much it hurt you. And now you're running around being like, please buy the movie. It's like, you said you didn't want fame. And now here you are asking for fame. I think that a lot of kids are encouraged to do things that they're passionate about. And that's so incredibly important and good, right? Encourage your kids to do what they're passionate about. Encourage your students. But also remember that you're their adult. You're their guardian in some way, shape, or form. So how do you make sure that these kids don't get hurt? How do you make sure that they are supported, that if they do get hurt, they can turn back to you, right? And we have found that the best way is to get the kid that made the mistake first to be there with them. So whenever I talk to people that are about to testify or that have the super cool Wall Street Journal interview, I'm like, yay, that's awesome. Don't say anything you're gonna regret. And remember, it's on a sheet of paper, so your sarcasm and your nuance isn't there. Teaching those skills as well has been like completely forgotten because we didn't think of it when we were doing it. How do we expect somebody else to think of that? And so that's something that I have recently been more working towards, talking about, like, I've been less in the legislative space and more in the, like, cool, let me media train you. And it's a step that I think we're becoming more conscious about or becoming better with. But yeah, that's something I didn't realize was gonna happen.
Yes, a lot of things I relate to there for sure. Thank you for sharing. To backtrack a little bit, I think in this movement specifically, and when we say movement, it's kind of, trying to help create a healthier world through social media, whether it's advocacy, whatever. But youth stories are really important because this is one of those experiences that's very unique where our generation grew up with this technology influencing us from the age of, for me, 12 on. But older generations did not have that experience. They did not go through high school or college with social media, with all the pressures that social media comes with. And so it is a really unique movement that when we are able to share our stories with adults, it is actually very powerful and important because we get to, again, be the experts because we lived through that and others didn't. And so it is really important to utilize youth storytelling, but doing it in a positive way can be difficult. And I've had some very negative experiences similar to Emmy. When I started this work, like I mentioned earlier, I created my nonprofit as a response to a mental health crisis in my community. And to be honest, the reason that I got kind of the platform that I have now is because of my storytelling. I would say I really started out as a storyteller, not necessarily as a founder or as a consultant or anything like that, but just as a storyteller, because I had a story to tell. And it was very shocking. And a lot of media companies wanted to make me a headline. But for me, I was 19 at the time, and I was so excited that MTV wanted to talk to me, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, like what? They're like, yeah, we're gonna send a film crew to your house. I'm like, what? Right? And then I kind of got used for my story. And so it was really difficult because, for more context, I lost 10 friends to suicide throughout my years of high school into college. And it was very obviously one of the most traumatic, horrific things I've ever experienced. It was foundational to my upbringing. It felt like a normal part of growing up for me and my community. And that, again, quickly became a headline. I had media outlets reaching out to me to be like, we love the work you're doing at NOSO. Like, can we talk about that? Like, we'd love to platform it. It's like, oh my gosh, of course, like having a huge media outlet cover my work would be amazing. And the story comes out and the headline is woman loses 12 friends to suicide. I'm like, that is not what I was pitched. And there were also documentaries I ended up being in where they cut out everything about the positive work I'm doing and that we're trying to help prevent suicide within schools. They cut all of that out to just paint me as a victim and to be like, this woman lost 12 friends to suicide, like whatever. And so that was so harmful for me because I got so excited by these opportunities as a young person with having no training or understanding of how the media wanted to use that story. And so it's been a journey for sure. Like I felt very hurt a lot of times and I felt used, but at the same time it taught me a lot about what opportunities to say yes to and what boundaries to have. And I think as a young person, it's easy to just say yes to everything and not have any kind of safeguards around your story or your lived experience because it is helpful. A lot of people have told me like, you sharing that was, really powerful, or like I also lost friends and it's really beautiful to see you like standing up for like suicide loss survivors, and that is equally true and important. But when it's done in that harmful way where you're kind of being extracted for a headline rather than actually having your work spotlighted can be really harmful. So I guess the call to action there is just like youth stories are very important, especially as educators when we're in the classroom. Instead of telling them, hey, put your phone down, be like, hey, do you want to talk about it? Like, what about Instagram is alluring to you? Like, what about Snapchat connects you to other people? And listen to those stories, and sometimes showcase those stories, but do it in a way that's respectful and intentional to actually help the young person become a voice for their generation.
And I want to quickly add, the reason why we were the ones that were so adamantly called upon is because when you think about young people, you don't think that they understand legislation, and you don't think that they're smart enough to understand how this works and to talk about the science of it and to talk about like legalese and understanding and breaking things down. And so you turn to the grown-up in the room for that, and then you turn to the kid and go, oh, what do you want to talk about? Like, what happened to you? Because most of the time when young people are put in these spaces, it's to storytell, which again is a powerful resource, but it isn't the only thing we're capable of. And so like people like Zamaan, he is incredible. I've sat in so many offices in federal buildings and state buildings with this man, and he can talk legalese and he can break things down. He is, I think, the smartest person I've ever met, to a degree that it is intimidating to be near him. And when we walk into rooms, adults always turn to the one grown-up that's there just to make sure we don't die and go, oh, what's the bill about? And Zamaan starts talking, and they're like, oh, we're facing the kids. It's always important to remember that young people aren't just stories. We're also incredibly innovative young minds. You put in the effort, we can learn anything, including policy, including how to talk to these legislators in ways that are effective and helpful. And so storytelling is where a lot of kids start, but legislation is where a lot of us end up. So pushing these kids in that direction, if they're passionate about it and want to say, you want to work on the solution, but you don't want to talk about what happened to you, that's fine. Join a team that does that. We can do that, right? That also helps mitigate young kids from sharing things that they didn't want to or later come to regret.
Thank you. I just think it was very important that we talked about that. This is something that I had no idea about going into this movement. As a storyteller, I came in being like, hey, so, you know, tell me about your work. I want to know everything. Tell me about your story. Tell me about the movement that you're building, all of this. And I came in and there was a lot of guards put up, like not necessarily to me, but I started to, as I got to meet these incredible people, I heard, yeah, well, just so you know, like last time I told the story, like this happened. And as someone coming into this, I was like, the last thing I want to do is repeat all of these mistakes. Especially, I think incentives are a really important conversation here. When you're talking to, say, a journalist who's coming in, why do they want your story? In my case, I think I was very lucky because I had nothing to profit off of from their story. I have no profit motive. I just care about the work that they're doing more than their story. I think the part of their story that is the solution is the part that I focus on with the documentary, because I think stories are powerful, but I think a lot of the documentaries that exist right now focus only on youth as the problem, only youth as the victims. And then they kind of turn to the adult experts to explain like all of the psychology behind why. That's fine, that's their approach. But I think we've really championed, you know, in the documentary, we don't feature any adults. It's only young people because we believe that young people are the experts and they truly do have the power to make the solution. And so in our case, when we're interviewing young people in the film, we do focus on, you know, a bit of their story because I think it's an important part of the why behind their work. But then it's like, okay, what's next? Like, we already know this is bad. And that's why when I was watching these documentaries, I was like, I know. Like, so what? Like, what's next? And I think I've felt so lucky that I got to learn about the what's next from them. And in the process, I've kind of, as a growing filmmaker, I learned a new question that I asked interviewees, which is, how do you want to be represented? Because people aren't asked that. People are just like, oh yeah, let's just use these little sound bites and then that's perfect for our story. But I think for me, you know, especially having become friends with these amazing people through this process, I don't want to burn bridges over a project. That's not in my best interest. And so I've learned a lot from these people right here about storytelling, and I've even tried to navigate my own experience because I'm growing into this movement now, telling my story in the film. I had no plans to tell my own story. I was just going to tell theirs. And so when I had filmed everybody and I was editing in my little college dorm room, and I was like, great, these are amazing stories, but what's the through line? Like, there's no connective tissue through everyone's story. And I had this realization. I was like, oh my God, I'm the connective tissue. Which I was like, shoot, like, I don't want to be on camera. Like, this just sucks. I had no plans to tell my story, but I realized that I felt like I had to for the film to make sense, because it's like, why are we just hearing all these random stories? Like, what's the why? And so my why was because I discovered them and I wanted you guys to hear about them as well. And so I'm learning how to protect myself as well in telling that story. I'm going to slowly, after the film comes out, get into those media spaces, and I'm still navigating how to protect myself in this space. So I just want to thank the both of you for sharing that and teaching me so much about that, because there's so much to learn when it comes to it. And I did want to allow Zamaan to quickly chime in on this, because I think Zamaan is actually a perfect example and taught me that you don't need to share your story to have meaning in this space, though your story is very important. I think you come from a place of very strong expertise, and I just wanted to, we do have a little, like, if you could concisely tell us.
Sorry, we talk a lot.
We blab. What's been your experience kind of talking to members of Congress with that expertise, and have they respected you? And yeah, just tell us a bit about that experience.
Yeah, I think the point that you made around like taking space and sharing expertise is so critical and so important. So many of us came into this space through our own volition and our own desire to get into this work. There was no organization that supported us or individuals that really carried us into it, who had experience before doing this. And so I think in many ways, we all had to build the insulation and the safeguarding around us. And that's why I think it's so critical and important to support youth-led organizations and young people doing this work, because ultimately we are able to help each other and ourselves in both protecting those stories, but also being able to, make them count for something, make them in service of a broader movement, that, it isn't just the headline that lives somewhere, that it actually translates into something. And so, we have had the privilege, all of us in different shapes and forms of showing up in positions of power and being able to speak to people who hold a lot of that power about what our experiences are. Some of those people are very interested in our perspective and are willing to give us the space and the time to share it. Some of them probably couldn't care less for what we had to say. And I think that's where we've had to build our own power and build our own expertise, is being able to take space and say, okay, we have lived experiences, we have expertise, we can deliver on this in a way that makes sense and resonates for people. And so we've been able to sit in pretty powerful rooms and convey our expertise, because we have forced our way into those rooms, frankly, because we've demonstrated over and over that we want to push the needle forward, that we are going to converse with you, but also, and want to share our perspective with you, get your perspective. But we're also going to hold you accountable for doing something with the stories that we've shared with you, with the statistics that we represent, with the vision that we're pushing forward. And I think part of that is some of the work that we've done at Design It For Us over the past year. Since the fall, we went on a campus tour to 5 different college campuses around the country to connect with young people on this as an issue, because I think as much as we are able to experience and talk about this with expertise, many young people don't have the tools to be able to share what this experience is in their life and how they're able to talk about it. And so we wanted to bring those conversations with young people, with experts, to them. And we ended up polling our participants at each of those locations, and at the conclusion of the tour produced what we call our Declaration of Digital Rights. It's this kind of youth framework that we believe is our statement of values, our inalienable rights as young people existing in the digital world. And we want to use these kinds of this kind of framework as a litmus test for both policy and the people who proclaim to be able to protect us. So, whether you are a company in this space and dedicated to doing this kind of work, are you safeguarding our right to privacy, our right to safety, our right to transparency, to know what you are doing behind the scenes? And I think, this is exemplary of this idea that youth experience and storytelling can be turned into something actionable, that we can drive solutions forward from this. And I think everyone on this stage, through storytelling, through policy work, through education work, represents the ability to be able to turn that experience into action and into solution.
What an amazing note to end on. Yes. So now I want to open it to the Q&A, because I'm sure you guys have got some questions bubbling in your brain. Any questions? We have about, say 13 more minutes. So, yeah.
There are mics available.
Oh, okay.
So that's probably the easiest way to do this.
Let's do that.
Thank you so much. This was really awesome. My question is, what are your thoughts on schools implementing no cell phone policies? Do you find that it's intrusive, or do you think it's helpful to kind of provide the structure to maybe put up some, of those boundaries with social media use and distractions? Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have talked to a lot of students that attend schools with phone bans to get their perspective on this, and for the most part, it seems positive. I think there's a lot of nuance because it depends how the policy is deployed. It depends if they use those yonder pouches, or if, it really depends a lot on how it's done. I think also there is an element of that it's very administrative usually. I feel like a lot of schools don't go to the classrooms and be like, hey guys, did you know social media can be harmful? Or did you know that your attention span is shortened? Or did you know this and that? They're just no phones. And students might feel resistant to that because they don't feel like they're being talked to on a plane of level understanding around that issue. And that's kind of part of the whole thing that we're talking about right now is engage youth voices and do this in a way that's respectful of them and to help actually support them, because obviously phone bans are done to support youth in a learning environment. That said, I personally think that there's really no reason to be distracted in schools on your phone. That just doesn't really have much of a place. And a lot of students that I talk to have said their biggest side effect of the phone bans is that they're feeling a lot more social and they're feeling a lot more in the moment, and they feel glad that it happened. So for the most part, I would say I think it's a positive solution as long as it's implemented mindfully. That's kind of my perspective.
And just to very lightly touch, I do want to also bring attention to some of those nuances, right? I come from a family of diabetics. So if my sugar goes down, I need my phone. I need to know what that number is. I need to know what it says. There are also, hate to talk about it, but we have to, very dangerous emergency situations that happen at school. So there needs to be a way to communicate, right? So I'm always of the mindset of those pouches. That seems to be the most effective, where if absolutely needed, we can get it. But for the most part, it stays, right? The phone is not sitting in some building, locked away all the way over. It's not on some wall where a kid can take it, right? The phone is still with me, just not in a way I can access it easily. I have seen and found that has been helpful, because it also gives kids the space they keep reaching for it, and it's in this pouch, and they're like, wait, I've tried to grab this 7 times in the past 20 minutes, what's going on? It's also a very visual way for them to see the problem, but also remembering some kids need their phone, right? And so giving that nuance, making sure that kids don't it's not fair, hers is out and mine can't be, right? Keeping that conversation open, starting it in that way, it's so important for kids to understand why it's happening instead of it just happening, because then it feels like an attack.
If I could just quickly add, I take a slightly different perspective to this. In a lot of the policy work we do, we push policymakers to think more about putting the onus on the companies and not parents, kids, or educators. And I think oftentimes the companies want to put the onus on anyone else except for them. And so I struggle with the phone ban in schools issue, because it puts the onus back on many of you as educators to have to figure out the strategies to implement that. And, you know, if you have a school district or a school system that's supportive of you, that's great in being able to implement that, but not all school systems do. And so, you know, I think that's, again, it comes back to why we support this safety and privacy by design framework, because it puts the legal onus back on the companies. And in addition, you know, the harms around social media and your phones follow you back home as well. And so I think what I certainly don't want is our policymakers to say, you know, we've banned the phone in school now, like checkbox, we've solved the problem. So I think we got to keep pushing for more accountability in this area, and also support from our governments. If they're going to implement this, then they need to be able to speak to schools, speak to administrators about what this looks like and how best to implement it.
Yeah, phone bans are not the solution. It's a Band-Aid. It's not the surgery. The surgery needs to be done, but for now, it's a Band-Aid, right? So this can't be a long-term solution either. And so far as what I'm looking at, it doesn't seem like anyone thinks that this is the perfect all-end long-term solution, but it is one that's getting popular really quickly. And so remembering that this is one of many things we can do, and it's a starting place, and as other places get more improvement, we can push back on things. And in my opinion, one of the first things we need to then pull back on once we start getting this ball rolling is the phone bans. Because kids also need to learn to self-regulate. This is a conversation we can have for like 7 years.
Yes. Okay, let's go to our next question.
So I have two separate questions. I'm being greedy. I'm curious about your opinion on the social media ban in Australia, right, which is a 16 and under. So it's been kind of controversial. Just curious to know what you guys think. And then the other question is, and I'm one of the adult experts on children's online safety. One of my biggest concerns right now is AI chatbots and character bots as companions for young kids, whether it's to substitute friendship, therapy, counseling, right, whatever. And there have been a few very sad stories coming out in the media already to do with that. So I'm curious about your views on that. I feel like we haven't even dealt with the social media issue yet. Now we have this new thing that we have to deal with. And I work a lot with schools in the US, around the world. People just don't have enough of an awareness about that. Parents certainly don't. I've reached out to the American Psychological Association, like a few other places, because I feel like this is something we need to talk about. I'd love to see you all talking about it more, but I'm just curious kind of what your thoughts are. Are you seeing that as an emerging risk when it comes to legislation? Are there things that we can do that? There's a very small bill that's been proposed in California around that. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So on the chatbot element, a couple of our fellow organization called the Young People's Alliance, ENCODE Justice, which is now ENCODE, they filed a complaint with the FTC recently about the chatbot replica. And I'm extremely concerned by these chatbots. I think the systems that they produce utilize many of the same features that we're seeing in social media as well. And so I think many of us and many across the movement in our work are starting to think and talk more about it. Obviously, I think you made reference to the Character AI case as well, just tragic case in a teen suicide in Florida. So, you know, we need to be pushing our policymakers in all ways, shapes, and forms on this issue. It can't just be social media.
And to talk briefly on the Australia law, there was a lot of conversation surrounding if there should be a hard age ban with the California Age Appropriate Design Code. And according to all of these social media platforms' terms of service, the age is 13. But a lot of people under the age of 13 are on it. A lot of parents are making child influencers that are significantly under the age of 13. And so it's this hard question where my genuine response to it is, I don't know. 16 in a way to me feels too old, because kids do, like, as much as I hate to say it in this way, like, kids need to be able to integrate themselves into social situations, and now social situations are purely based on social media. I don't use social media often. I have the accounts because work makes me. I'm on them for probably less than 30 minutes a week. I don't know what people are talking about. I don't have like friends that I can talk to about what's happening in the world, because I get my news from the news, they get their news from social media with all these extra conversations. So it is this thing where I've experienced, like, I know what it feels like to be left out because you're not on your phone all the time, but also being on your phone all the time is detrimental. So I feel like 13's too young, I feel like 16's too old, but 14 and 15 don't sound right either. And it's not like we can like make kids take a test and be like, are you mature enough for this? Because that's just weird. Like, I feel like we need to strip away from the idea of age in a way, and to be like, a 9-year-old shouldn't be on this. I feel like we're all pretty hard agreeing on that, but also, just because it's now midnight on this date and I'm 13, I'm suddenly fully able and capable to be on these apps. That also doesn't make sense to me either. And so I think a big part of it is these conversations with the adults in their lives, because yes, this is not the adults in these individual child's lives' responsibilities, but also that phone is in your house, that phone is in your schools. These conversations need to start somewhere, and they need to start now. And so I hate to say case by case, family by family, child by child basis, but in certain ways and in certain spaces it has to. And I feel like 16 is, because my question is like, what's different about 16 and 15 that's so detrimental? Like what? You know, like, I don't know, but I also do, but I definitely don't. Like, it's just complicated.
Yeah, I think it just comes back to that blanket solution that we've been talking about, right? Like, if we're not getting at the core principles of design regulation, business model regulation, we're just saying ban it entirely. We're not giving young people the tools to succeed at the end of the day. So yes, I know we have some more questions, so maybe feel free to find us after, because I think we are at time now. So thank you so much for coming. We really enjoyed.
Oh, we have 2 minutes?
Oh, we have 2 minutes?
Let's
Okay.
do a quick one.
Rapid fire question. Go.
Rapid fire.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. I'm in a school district in Baltimore City that we are part of some litigation with other school districts against Facebook, met all of them, and trying to implement one of these phone policies. So like, things are happening, but I'm curious specifically around, student voice and advocacy. I go back to Baltimore City. I'm district based, but work with schools. What's like the thing you recommend doing? Is it finding kids that are passionate about it and they start a no-so campaign, or is it clubs? Is it finding the right principals? Like, what's the action step with schools specifically as these larger things are happening?
Do you want to take it?
Yeah, I'll take this. Great question. Similarly, mirroring the last answer, it depends on your school a lot. Every school is very different the way they function. I would say start with a generalized, almost poll of the student population and find those passionate students. I think having a youth-led movement is one of the most powerful ways you can start something within the school, because I think, again, almost always if the administration's like, we're doing this, kids will push back, even if they agree with you. So just, I don't know how that would look. Maybe put up a poster, be like, hey, are you interested in leading the cause on something around this? Or like, because I think young people, if they know, hey, a phone ban is coming, but we can have some creative process to be able to get involved in the implementation of it, I think they'll be a lot more likely to get involved with that. So I'd be happy to talk to you about strategies around that and seeing if we can work together. But I think generally starting there and hearing the amazing solutions they probably can come up with will be very inspirational, and then creating a sort of process where there is almost this back and forth between the administration and the students. So giving students the floor to craft those solutions and come up with a plan to implement it, and then trying it out, and then also being open to being flexible and open to kind of criticism or alterations once a phone ban has been implemented. Is that helpful? Okay.
Yeah, we Log Off has also done a couple of school things. We found that using a little bit of reverse psychology and making the kid think that they did it, you guys can set up the tee and put balls in a bucket next to them and just kind of leave a bat around. A kid's gonna put the bat on the ball and swing it, right? So, and it's fully the kid's idea because they're the one that put the tee-ball together, right? But putting the pieces there and letting kids find the solution also ignites that passion. And through that, you'll find those kids that can then come and reach and come to different organizations or create their own and implement their own solutions. Kids are very smart, kids are very creative, kids are very savvy. In the ways that you guys are worried that they're gonna find the loopholes in these solutions, they will come up with the solutions that you guys didn't even think of, right? So open that conversation, let the kids play ball.
I'd also say for an easier in, student governments are usually very active. So you could always start there. Just be like, is anyone in student government interested in leading this? And I most likely will probably find some people. So that's kind of an easy start.
Yeah, it's a universal issue. And I think that's the kind of through line that brings us all together in this is like, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what age, like you're struggling with this, most likely. So just kind of opening that conversation is the great first step. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.